a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Tech Brewing, now in a liquor store near you. I'm John Bonus, the Twins Daily, with me, Aaron Gleeman of the Evelyn.
Anything happened since our last episode?
Good Lord, man.
Yeah.
This has been...
We got a lot to talk about.
We were a little worried this offseason would be kind of a slow offseason.
Yeah.
We're not really sure if they're going to be making a lot of changes or something, and good Lord.
Well, we'll see. They might have made all the changes
maybe.
in the first week. Since our last free episode, which was like 9 days ago or something like that.
Where we recorded just prior to our end-of-season meeting with Derek Falvey and Rocco Baldelli to talk about Thad Levine leaving the Twins. That was way back in...
So since we pressed stop on the last free episode, here's what they've done. They've officially fired Thad, or parted ways with Thad Levine.
Correct, yes.
His contract was up, so it's not technically a firing. They've parted ways with three hitting coaches and Tony Diaz, 4 total coaches.
That's right.
They announced a new television deal where they are finally, I would argue, leaving Bally Sports / Diamond Sports and going out on their own or with
MLB
under
media, right.
MLB's umbrella to offer a direct-to-consumer streaming option with no blackouts. And we'll talk about that too.
Yes.
And then one day after that, it was so crazy. Like this was on Wednesday when they did the TV deal.
I think it was Tuesday, but we talked about it Wednesday, right?
Okay.
And then Thursday,
then they announced that via press release, which we'll get into this, believe me, that the Twins are, quote, the Pohlads announced, quote, their intent to explore a sale of the Minnesota Twins by way of a press release, not even that long of a press release, just a few quotes and a couple of lines.
And a phone call with all of the employees, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Conference call.
They announced it to the employees first
Right.
and then sent out a press release like an hour or two later and didn't do any media around that. They didn't really have any availability. I haven't seen anybody get a quote or anything from the Pohlads. That might be their way of saying, well, now we have no motivation to talk to the media because we're selling the damn thing. So you guys can go to...
You guys figure the rest.
Go kick rocks, basically, and I'll kick rocks. That's fine with me. So we got a lot to talk about. And MLB's down to the Final Four. We should note, as we talk about ownership and payroll and all that sort of stuff, front offices, that MLB's Final Four this year, out of 30 teams, they rank number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 25 in payroll.
Right, that's it.
And to me, that would normally say to everyone, if you don't live in New York or Los Angeles, well, who's 25? I'll root for them. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the Cleveland Guardians.
They're still the top of my list right
Sure,
now. They're the
I
top
guess.
of my remaining list.
Truly just
Who are your top,
lesser of all evils or whatever.
How do the 4 rank in terms of who you're kind of rooting for?
I'm almost finding myself rooting for the Dodgers.
Yeah, they're my number 2.
Because, well, they are they've almost, to me, overtaken the Yankees as the most powerful MLB team over the last decade or so.
Right.
Which isn't to say the Yankees are not like that, but the Yankees of the late 90s and early 2000s dwarfed other teams' spending pretty annually, and they made huge moves. Now the Yankees are just like top 3 always.
Right.
And the Dodgers, especially once they added Shohei Ohtani and everything else this offseason, they spent over $1 billion. Right. And yet, I find myself drawn to them because I think their best and highest paid players are just extremely likable and fun.
Yeah, Shohei
Ohtani.
I would love to
Betts,
see Ohtani win a World Series.
Right, yes, Freddie Freeman. I mean, I've said this. I said this before, 3 years ago, and people were not as into it as an opinion as they probably are now. I have no doubt in my mind he's the greatest baseball player of all time. Like none. Mm-hmm. I didn't have this doubt 2 years ago. Now it's like not even a question. And I think we'll see that next year when he comes back and pitches too.
Yeah, right.
And Mookie Betts to me has been one of the I don't want to say underrated, but he's a inner circle Hall of Fame guy.
Sure.
And seems very likable. And Freddie Freeman is just one of the great hitters of this generation, basically. And he's limping around out there on one leg, scoring on singles from second and stuff last night. So it's weird to me. Like I'm certainly not arguing that they're like an underdog or they're a rags to riches story, and they're just a riches to riches story. But compared to the Mets, I mean, why am I rooting for the Mets?
Yeah, Cleveland's at the top of my list because they haven't won for 70 years.
It's hard for me to do that.
I know. I don't.
I was rooting for Kansas City and Detroit. I had no problem doing that.
I don't think I've been active enough on Twitter to really dislike Cleveland as much as I'm supposed to at this point. I think that's driving a lot of it.
Like, I view it as the NFC North, and I'm not the biggest Vikings fan, but I'm a lifelong Vikings fan. Detroit, I was happy for their success last year.
Sure.
Like, I mean, they've been through hell.
Right.
Go for it. If the Bears, despite the fact that it makes Lavelle Neal happy, and I don't like that because I like to make fun of him, if Caleb Williams is good and the Bears look to be on an upward trend, you know what? Go for them.
Yeah. I'm not thrilled about it.
Right.
But
It's, that's to me like the Kansas City and Detroit of the AL Central.
Right. Okay.
I don't want them to win because, I'd rather the Twins win, but that's fine. Good for them. Their fans have been through rough times, rough decades, rough centuries, whatever. But I don't want the Packers to win a damn thing. And more and more this year, or past couple years, that's how I view the Guardians.
Yeah, see, the Packers are the White Sox to me.
Well, yeah, the White Sox are just
right. Like, they can't lose enough to make me
right.
happy,
I mean, I normally would have agreed with that with the White Sox. I think my stance on the White Sox is equal to yours and off-stated.
And I view Cleveland more like I view the Bears. Okay. Like, I don't want them to win.
That's fair,
but I still want them to win more than I want the Yankees.
Yeah.
The Yankees are my least favorite. They're number 4.
I'm not rooting for the Yankees.
They're number 4. And then I've got Cleveland at the top because it's been 70 plus years. So let's let them get one. I would also, by the way, love to see Cleveland versus the Mets, where you've got Lindor, who used to play for Cleveland, trying to compete for a World Series for the team he left.
Yeah. I don't want to. I find Francisco Lindor incredibly likable as superstars go, and Jose Ramirez has been one of my favorite players always. I mean, I don't think I've praised a opposing player more consistently over the life of this podcast.
I think you're correct.
Than Jose Ramirez. Yep. And so I'm not suggesting that, but I mean, it's fun to watch Shohei Ohtani. I like the idea of the best player, and I also like the idea maybe of his first year getting away from the mess that is the Los Angeles Angels, winning a World Series, winning MVP after not even making the damn playoffs with the Angels. Right. So that's where we're at.
Number 2, I've got the Dodgers, and they just outrank the Mets because I would lived in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the Mets. I'd certainly root for the Mets over the Yankees.
Yes.
I mean, I would root for...
Right.
I don't want to say anything mean, but I was going to say something ridiculous. But over the Yankees, fill in the blank, terrible thing over the Yankees. I would root for a stub toe in the morning over the Yankees. I would root for a deep paper cut between your fingers over the Yankees. I would root for, a nosebleed when you're up in front of a room making a presentation over the Yankees, etc. You get the idea.
Got it.
So that's MLB's Final Four. So let's talk through some of this stuff as we often do. We did immediate reactions to a couple of these topics over on the Patreon side to our beloved Patreon subscribers.
Join the party. There's 4,100 others who are already at the party. You are not at the party. Go join the party.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to party with two cool guys like me and John Boner? Who's going to be at the party? Gleeman and Bodas. I'm washing my hair that night, actually. We did like the poll ad announcement we did within an hour.
Yes.
Just sort of a off the cuff emotion dump.
Yeah.
Which I think people generally liked. And then a couple days before that, we did kind of a next morning reaction to the TV situation and tried to walk through that. We're going to go through all that stuff, obviously, but it's going to be a condensed version. Right. And we've had some time to let it breathe a little bit, so it won't quite be as rant filled. I probably won't have as many curses as I did in the last one. Who knows? You never know. But if you enjoy this show, but also if you in general have enjoyed what I would describe as sort of more critical than most places coverage of this collapse and of ownership and of the state of the television situation over the last year or 18 months, or especially over the last several months, we would love to have you help support it. and it's inexpensive, and you get commercial-free Twins Talk once or twice a week more than this free episode.
And you don't get us bothering you to go join the Patreon because you're already on the Patreon.
That's true. You can go, hey, that's me. I'm one of those beloved Patreon.
That's it.
So Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. You can go. The whole back catalog is free as soon as you sign up. So you can go listen. We did an hour on the poll ad situation. We did an hour plus on the TV situation, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk through some of this stuff, big picture. And within that, they also announced they're going back to CCO or staying with CCO
right. Yeah, that's
as
right.
a radio entity.
Yeah.
That didn't really make much news because it's just business as usual. No change really, but they're back on CCO after, as I reported a month and a half ago, they talked to KFAN, they talked to Score North. It's hard to characterize how close they were to leaving. I think staying at CCO was always the default option, at least with the people or persons able to actually make that decision with the hammer in that room, basically. Yeah. But they certainly were in talks with those two places. They had multiple meetings with both of those other places. Those places laid out their vision for it. They pitched ideas, that sort of thing. But they'll be back on CCO radio. Okay, so let's talk about obviously the big story. After 40 years since Carl Pohlad bought the Twins in 1984 from Calvin Griffith for $44 million, they are announcing that the team is intent to sell the team. There's some possibility, obviously, that they don't sell. The Washington Nationals were on the market for 2 years pretty recently and didn't sell. The Los Angeles Angels were sort of on the market, and then the owner basically said, nah, forget that.
Okay.
A lot of it depends on what the asking price is. I mean, we've seen estimates from like Forbes and Spotrac and stuff like that where, 1.5, 1.7 million, something.
March of 2024, Forbes estimated it was worth $1.46 billion.
Right. We've also seen, the Royals sold recent for like 1.2 or 1.3. The Orioles sold last year for 1.7 or 1.8.
Something like that.
You have some more expensive sales too. The Marlins going back a decade plus sold for 1.2, I think, something like that. So that's the range. I don't think 1.4, 1.5 is outlandish, but that also doesn't guarantee that that's what they're asking for. I mean, that's just an estimate from a magazine. I think what I would say is if their asking price is similar to the public estimates, they'll sell it. If it's not, if they want 2.5 billion or something like that, then, different story than what we're assuming here.
Yeah. I mean, there's also evidence just to suggest they're sort of motivated sellers.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the Pohlads have now sold 4 businesses since the COVID epidemic, which is when, and the Pohlads have a fair amount invested in commercial real estate. That's an industry that, you need to continue to pump money into, and it's an industry that's struggling right now. And we've seen them go and sell, a couple radio stations in 2020, and then JB Hudson Jewelers in 2021, and 9 car dealerships last year. Yeah. And, I would say this is sort of the gem in the crown of the Pohlad empire. Yeah. So I think they've been kind of working their way up to this point.
Well, and also it represents, if you look at any sort of estimates of their familial, is that how you'd say, wealth, it's like, $4 billion, something like that, right, with a B. Well, if the Twins are worth $1.5 billion,
right,
out of $4 billion,
they can't have a whole lot more.
Well, I mean, 2.5 of other stuff is a lot. Like, for instance, I'm not up to even $1 billion of other stuff.
Really?
I don't know where you're at on this. But
I don't want to break.
No, you wouldn't want to. No. But yeah, I mean, if they're looking to, I guess, liquidize their portfolio,
liquidate.
Yeah. But doesn't liquidate mean sell it at discount?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No.
Liquefy.
Maybe. Okay. Yeah.
Why not? Turn into liquid. Their capital. I mean, some of the stuff is they just built the Four Seasons Tower basically right out by Target Field. It's in the back of center field basically. That's going to be tough to get out of a year later. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I think that's the situation.
Well, and you wouldn't want to sell your commercial real estate right now because the market for commercial real estate sucks.
Well, yeah, a lot of people don't like to sell stuff, but sometimes they have to.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's how pawn shops exist.
But my point is, if you've got a choice of selling this thing that right now you're going to take a huge hit on, or sell something like a baseball team,
right?
You're not going to take a big hit.
I think the sense that I've gotten both through their actions and the limited words that they've given, but also just talking to some people. I think, as often happens, there's like some old proverb. It's like the third generation thing, where it's like the first generation gets the wealth, the second generation builds the wealth, the third generation
the second generation manages and the third generation liquefies.
Whatever. Yeah.
Right.
I don't necessarily know that that's the case, but I think the case here, I should say. But in general, I think that's a decent way to look at it. But it never seemed to me that, I mean, you can argue, I suppose, people who are older than me, like you, have a better mindset on this probably, how emotionally attached to the actual baseball team itself Carl Pohlad ever was.
Yeah.
I know his wife, Eloise, was always touted as the one in the family who loved baseball, basically.
Mostly by Sid Hartman.
Okay.
Right? Like that, like you and I both think that is the case.
Yeah.
I remember that was a constant narrative of Sid's.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's really the case or not, but that was a constant
Sid's never
media
said
narrative.
an incorrect thing in his life.
Exactly. Right.
But regardless of that, then, since 2009, when Carl passed away, Jim Pohlad took over the team. And I never really got a great sense of what his kind of emotional attachment to baseball itself or the team itself was. I think he didn't give a lot of interviews. When he did give interviews, he
seemed like a manager, but somewhat distant.
Fairly even-handed,
right?
Except for the total system failure thing.
Right. But even that was said in a very even-handed, sort of direct kind of way.
That's true. It reads more shocking than it was said, probably.
Right, that's right.
I should ask Chip Scoggins, because it was a Chip Scoggins column that I remember reading that in 16, I guess.
Okay. What the tone of it was?
Yeah, what the tone of it was.
I'm sure the tone was.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what to say. I guess it's just a total system failure.
I think that's about right.
Yeah, that's about right.
They're not a family that rants much, at least publicly that I've seen.
Yeah.
But now, Joe took over day-to-day operations, the executive chair from Jim less than 2 years ago. Like almost exactly 2 years ago, but less than 2 years ago. And the sense I've gotten is that whatever emotional attachment the third generation of this billionaire family, Carl being kind of the patriarch, and then his son is Jim, and he also had, I believe, two other sons. I want to say Bob and I forget.
Bob is right, but I can't remember.
They're all very simple American names, whatever they are.
I did chart this out once upon a time, but
it's an interesting family tree. And then you get to the third generation, and as things go, there's many more of them, but it's kind of diluted a little bit in terms of like the strength of it, I guess.
Sure.
I always got the sense that of the third generation, which is basically the grandchildren of Carl, in this case, Joe is Carl's grandchild and Jim's nephew.
Right.
They didn't really care. Like, they're into other stuff.
I thought Joe did.
Right. No, here's what I think. I think of the third generation, Joe was by far, or is by far, the one who has the strongest emotional attachment to the baseball team itself, to baseball itself. But I don't know that that's real. That's a low bar, is what I'm saying. I think and I'm not saying this is like a moral failing or something.
Sure.
If your grandpa owns something,
right,
you don't need to care about it.
My grandpa built a car out of spare parts. My dad loved cars. I want nothing to do with figuring out how to figure out.
Right.
I don't want to change my own oil.
I mean,
right.
It also happens, by the way, my grandpa owned a bar in Duluth long before I was born, called the Metropole Bar. Actually, several of our listeners have sent me pictures or remembrances, or somebody sent me, they had a matchbook from there.
Wow.
And it was really cool. Anyway, he sold that long before I was even,
Sure.
My mom wasn't even married at that point. I don't even know my mom was out of college at that point. His kids couldn't care less about the bar business. None of them wanted to be in the bar business.
Right.
Me, if he'd still had the bar when I was born, I'd be running a bar in Duluth right now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
and
right.
so it can skip generations too. So I'm not mocking or criticizing anything. The fact that your grandpa did something and made up billions of dollars off it, and now you're being handed the keys to it.
Right.
I give him some level of credit for stepping forward if it's possible that no one else wanted that responsibility and saying, I'll take it. But what I'm getting at is it never seemed to me that they were or are attached to it beyond just well, we got to run it. It's ours.
Right.
And as we've
It's
said,
an investment.
right?
Like,
As we've said over the years, and it's a lot more fun investment than owning a bank or something like that, or commercial real estate. It's fun. You go there, you watch a baseball game. Hey, we own this. This is amazing, right? Everyone here paid money that goes to us. That's amazing.
Right.
But I feel like over the years, when we've kind of gone down the rabbit hole that we've done a lot recently, talking about, they're claiming tens of millions of dollars of losses every year, and they're cutting payroll, and we're saying, how can you really realistically lose money running a professional baseball team, with all the national TV contracts, and doesn't this mean they aren't running their business all that well, and yet they're refusing to not run it as strictly? But we talk about all that stuff. You guys have heard a million times. And at the end of all of it, a lot of times I will say something like, well, if they don't like it so much, why don't they just sell the damn thing?
Right.
And it's weird because it has seemed to me over the last decade or so, and again, maybe this was the case with Carl too, because by the way, it's worth noting that in the mid-90s, like 5 years after they won their second World Series, Carl Pohlad agreed to sell the Twins to a guy in North Carolina.
Yes.
And the only reason that didn't happen in like 96, I want to say, or 97,
right, yeah.
The only reason that didn't happen is because the voters in North Carolina voted no to finance a new ballpark that would have been the home to the North Carolina Twins.
Correct.
Or whatever. So that gets nixed. And I went back this week and I read some of Carl's quotes at the time. I mean, I've never read worse quotes from an owner of a team.
Yeah.
He's like, these ungrateful fans, they haven't supported it. Why would I keep losing money here? Sell it.
Right.
And he couldn't sell it. 4 or 5 years later, in 2001, 2001, they then agreed to be bought out essentially by Major League Baseball itself for $250 million, and then the team was going to be killed.
It was $250, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's some.
Okay.
It was never like there's no document, but it.
Okay.
As far as I've seen, it was $250.
Okay. I thought I remembered it as $250, but I saw
there were reports
Phil's story
that were
that said
like
$150, and I was
$200.
like, I thought it was $250.
Well, either way.
Right.
They tried to sell the damn thing in the mid-90s. They tried to kill the damn thing for
Right.
profit in 2001. And the only thing that stopped that was agreed to. The only thing that stopped that was a judge in Minnesota saying, you can't kill the team. You got X number of years left on the lease with the Metrodome.
They had 1 year left. And then what really killed it is when they negotiated the CBA at the end of the 2002 season. That's one of the things the players insisted on is you can't contract teams.
Yes.
It's not totally clear, and there's still debate to this day as to whether or not Pohlad was absolutely serious about this or this was yet one more negotiating leverage tactic to try to get a new stadium, right? And whether or not Major League Baseball bought into it because they were in the middle of negotiating with the players union for a new contract, and they wanted it as leverage as well, But ultimately, it was between like basically from 1994 to 2006, 2008. It was terrible ownership. I mean, but you skipped also the one where they cut payroll down to basically Brad Radke and a bunch of guys making minimum.
They had like a $9 million payroll at one point. Like.
Yeah, right.
And that's the era, by the way, I became a fan in. Like, I vaguely remember, I was 8 in 1991. I was 4 in 87. I have no memory of that whatsoever. I'm sure I watched it, but I have some memory of sitting on my couch in my living room, at my house in Highland Park growing up, watching in 91, but, not really. I've turned it into a memory, I think, in my head.
Right.
But when I started going to games regularly and my friends would go and, watching them on TV, that was, 95 probably so I was 12. 95 to 2000 basically is my teenage years. You could not draw up a worse team on the field or a less, kind of in supportive ownership off the field.
That's right.
You toss in the Metrodome. I mean, I went to day games there when I was a kid. You could talk to somebody in left field if you wanted.
We moved back here in 1995. We bought season tickets, and the season tickets was $99 for the entire year.
Yeah,
and you got a free bat signed by Kirby Puckett as part of it.
So anyway, that's all to say that while Carl, I don't know that he wanted the team either, really, after a while.
Well,
but the third generation, I think, in terms of just, and even to some extent the second generation, because it's before the last 2 years, I just got the sense that they thought they had been like sentenced to owning the Twins. Like some court had said, your punishment for being this rich is to own this baseball team that you won't fully invest in and everyone will loathe you for it. And it was like, you see in like a prison movie, the guy's crossing days off on the wall, like left in his sentence.
That's what you think?
And I always wondered, like, why own something like that? There's really only one reason, right? Well, there's two. One is you feel like my grandfather or my father owned this thing, and I have to be responsible for it. Or you're making money at it.
Yeah, that's right.
Or both. And what's funny now is something we've talked about year after year after year. Even if they are correct in their claims of losing tens of millions of dollars in certain seasons, of late especially. Well, they bought it for $44 million in 1984. And as we just talked about, when they sell it, it's going to sell for, I believe, closer to $2 billion than $1 billion. But let's call it 1.5. If you sell something for 1.5, and by the way, part of that 1.5 is the publicly funded ballpark that is an asset in that deal that they get to sell, essentially, to the next person. That's basically a profit of $40 million a year for 40 years. Slightly less than that, but you get the idea. You bought it for 40, and then you made $40 million a year in appreciation of your luxury item asset. Right. And I know people go, well, they could have invested that money in the blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But all that time, then, they got to be the face of a beloved thing in Minnesota. Right. And if you don't think that ownership of the Twins, being the people who own the baseball team in Minnesota, help them with other deals and get other opportunities. It's sports washing, right? I mean, we've seen this in all cases. It made them a name that people wanted to deal with. And so to come out of that at the end and be able to sell it for $1.5 billion in profit is the reason why the penny pinching year after year after year and decade after decade was so maddening. And okay, before we get into some of the details of it, but let's first talk about our first couple of
let's talk about a different family-owned business.
Yes.
Black Stack
They invest
Brewing.
in their business, John, and they have much better pizza and beer than the Target Field.
That is correct. Black Stack Brewing. Black Stack Beer is a fantastic local brewery that has been, I think a little bit of an underground hit. It's definitely something that people in the brewery community know because they want to collaborate it. They want to.
Would you say you're an honorary member of the brewery community?
I would say I am an honorary member.
Yeah,
of the
because you're supporting all of them. Basically,
exactly
go
right.
on. Sorry,
that's right. And now they have recently signed up with a distributor that allows them to distribute their award-winning beers all over
tons
the state
of liquor
of Minnesota.
stores,
right?
Basically everywhere you can look, and if the one by your house doesn't have it yet, mention it to them because they can get it in stores.
That's right. You just go to if you're looking for a place, you can just go to their where to buy page on their website and check out where you can buy your favorite beer.
Black Stack Beer. Just Google that. You can look it up. They also have a location that you can go drink the beer at.
Yeah, right over at 94 and 280. That's a cool location as well. They've got. I think they're especially well known for their hazy IPAs or their IPAs, but they've also got a French Slopes French Pilsner, Pull Tabs Pale Ale, or Uncut Jams, their Strawberry Rhubarb Sour. Black Stack Brewing, it's they're our presenting sponsor, and I could not be more excited about being associated with them.
Our next sponsor is Harry's, a longtime sponsor. The way Harry's works, Harry's Razors, is that they've sort of cut the middleman out of the entire process of buying a razor.
That's right.
And
direct to consumer.
Yes, direct to consumer.
That's right.
And
we'll be talking about that with TV. We started it with razors back 10 years ago.
That's right.
That's right.
They were proof of concept for the Minnesota Twins. That has two benefits. One, it just eliminates a big cost of this whole thing.
Right.
And so then that allows them to offer quality razors that are as good or better than other razors available. And they just send them directly to you at a price point that is lower.
And these are really good razors. I mean, these are 5-blade razors, and they are, in fact, about half the price of the normal.
But the other nice part is you don't have to go to a store and track someone down and have them annoyedly open up a case and give it to you. And so what happens there is people just stick with their worn down razors and are shaven with a razor you should have tossed because it's annoying to have to go get a new one. Well, this just 2 clicks on harrys.com/Gleeman and they'll just send it right to your house.
That's right. So you can get the edge on your shave with Harry's. You get started with a $13 trial set, but you're paying just $3. Just $3 at harrys.com/Gleeman. Again, you get a $13 trial set for just $3 at harrys.com/Gleeman. That's harrys.com/Gleeman for a $3 trial set.
Okay. So just to run through a few more of these things. I think why, like in terms of why now, I guess we talked about some of the reasons in terms of like ancillary business.
Maybe there's
stuff.
some, yeah.
I also think it's 2 years after Joe Pohlad took over. And if you remember, 6 weeks after he took over for his uncle, they signed Carlos Correa.
Right.
And I remember being at that press conference and Joe was up there on the stage and he didn't talk a lot, but around that time, he talked a very big game, I thought. He talked about having a higher tolerance for risk than his predecessor.
Yep.
He talked about wanting to push for World Series. I mean, you can go read quotes. There's quotes. There were articles written at the time. Oh, a new era of Twins ownership, and everybody was getting all excited. They were eating it up, and why wouldn't they? Fans were desperate for it.
Sure.
And he was talking about, well, maybe we'll raise the payroll to 180 some years or 200 some years or whatever. And they had a $160 million payroll in 2023, and they won the division, and they won their first playoff series in 20 years.
Perfect time to do exactly that.
Yeah. And then they shaved $30 million off the payroll. They had the worst collapse in Twins history. They added nothing at the trade deadline. They finished in 4th place, and now the team's up for sale. And so that is an incredible, 23-month journey there, I guess, from start to finish. But I think the reality of it is this past season that just ended, their payroll was 24% below the MLB average payroll. And in their final 5 years at the Metrodome, collectively, their payroll was 23% below the average MLB payroll. They are truly back to MLB or Metrodome level spending relative to the rest of the league. And if that's where you're at, as a third generation owner, and people are rightfully furious, and you're getting asked questions from jerks like me that you don't want to answer, obviously, and people are chanting "sell the team" and all that, why keep it?
Right.
Like if it doesn't matter that much to you, and I would argue that, well, I'm sure they will all say it matters a lot to them. Their actions speak a lot louder than their words, certainly here. And so in the 23 seasons since the contraction threat, so the last 23 seasons, they had an above average payroll twice. Do you want to guess the years? Twice in 23 seasons.
2010?
Don't overthink it.
2011.
Yeah. The first 2 years of the new ballpark.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
They've had a below average payroll in 21 of the last 23 seasons. Collectively, over that span of 23 seasons since the contraction thing was stopped, they've been almost 20% below the MLB average over the course of 23 seasons for a total, I guess, shortfall relative to average, not relative to top 10 or what, average of almost $400 million in payroll that they're short of average over including $41 million short of average this past season. And it's sad, but I get it that so many fans, and I've even seen media members write this, react to this news after a solid 30 plus years of the entire fan base disliking the Twins ownership and feeling that they're, cheap Pohlads, pinching pennies, unhappy with all of it. And I'm saying, aside from trying to sell the team, trying to contract the team, all this other stuff that would make you not like an ownership group. And yet, after 40 years of that ownership and at least 30 years where people have not liked the ownership and not felt they've done right by the team, because I can tell you that because when I was growing up, it was the same thing. Sure. It was just about a different generation of Pohlads.
Well, when I was growing up, it was about a different owner.
Calvin Griffith, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, but this goes to what I'm saying. So, and then they announced, we're going to sell the thing. And the reaction by so many, especially I'm weirded out by how many people in the media reacted this way. But I get that it makes sort of a devil's advocate column or whatever.
Maybe.
But I'm also saddened, but I get it, why so many fans have reacted this way too. And we could talk about it. But the reaction is, well, I don't know if that'll be better. It could be way worse.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like 40 years of this ownership and 30 plus years where unequivocally, the fan base as a whole has been unhappy with their investment in the team, the vibes, how they go about things, their public stances on things, all this stuff. The fact that they tried to sell or contract the team twice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly of late, it's as bad as it's ever been. And yet they finally go, we'll sell it. And there's a not small chunk of the fan base, and I feel for them, who go, I don't know, maybe we should have stuck with our captors. Like the next, it's like Stockholm Syndrome. It really is.
Yeah.
And when I say I get that that's a natural reaction to change.
Right.
I personally hate change. Like,
yes, you do.
I was living in an 800 square foot apartment in Uptown when I met the Duchess of Marshfield.
Right.
I'd still be living there with her if it was up to me. But she was like, after she moved in there, she's like, there's no closet space. It's a 1-bedroom. We barely got a bathroom here.
Right.
What are we doing? We got a cat now. We got So I begrudgingly, I was like, I don't know if this new place is going to be better. I don't know if, and we're on like our place since then. But my point is, you can talk yourself into.
You should have seen me try to talk him into the Patreon, folks.
Right, exactly. I get it.
Right,
believe
that's
me.
right.
But at some point, you got to look at your circumstances as a fan base and say, I get that you can't really detach from the emotion of it,
Right.
but try to look at it logically and just think, where have the Poleheads ranked in your mind as an ownership group for the last 40 years, or especially the last 30 years, or if you want to just say the last year? And what's the likelihood that the next owner or owners, whoever they end up being, picked out of a hat of billionaires, is legitimately worse than that?
Sure.
And even if they are, okay.
How much worse?
How much worse?
Right, yeah,
now,
right.
I will say, the one caveat I'll give to all that is, if they move to Dan team,
right.
well, that's the worst of all.
That's right.
But I just don't see that happening. I don't think I'm not naive enough to say that it couldn't happen.
Sure.
And I'm not naive enough to say that the fact that they got 15 years left on Elite is going to stop any of this if someone truly wants to buy a team and move it.
Right.
I just find that really unlikely. And the truth is, if that looks like it's going to happen, we'll have all the time in the world to talk about that, because it'll be the last Twins thing we talk about, basically. That's DEF CON is 1 worse or 5 worse? DEF CON 5.
That's right.
My military background, I don't know if 1 or 5 is worse.
I think 5 is the worst.
Okay, well, whatever. But more realistically, if you're kind of glass half empty, is someone will come in and buy the thing, and they'll run it just like the Poleheads did. They'll say, we're not making enough profit. Maybe they even lower payroll and all that stuff. In which case, you're just basically in the same spot with different captors. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
And I don't know that that's better. I don't know that it's worse. But after 40 years, I'm willing to. I wrote this morning. I'm willing to open door number 2.
Yeah, sure.
And see what we got.
That's exactly
I'll close my eyes and I'll turn that knob and let's just walk through it together.
That's right.
And if there's something worse behind there, then shame on us. Don't we feel silly? But what if there's something better behind there? Even slightly better. And what if there's something a lot better? What if someone buys this team and just wants to own a winning baseball team and wants to be beloved in their community and wants to just win and has big ideas for what it can turn into, or just looked at this market and said, why does this have to be a bottom third market?
Right.
Why can't we have a well-funded winning baseball team?
Why can't this be a baseball town?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, right.
That's the hope, obviously. And there's another possibility that it just doesn't sell,
Right.
in which case we're just back to where we started, and it's just laid bare that they don't even want to own the damn thing that they own.
Yeah, right.
And I'm getting pulled aside in the hallway at Target Field more than I already am and saying those columns you wrote when they thought we were going to sell. Blah, blah, blah. But that's fine, too. I mean, I think on a scale of 1 to 100, the likelihood of this thing being significantly worse is either relocation, obviously,
Right.
or an ownership group that just kind of tries to take it down to the studs, basically.
Right. Yeah.
I just feel like that's much less than a coin flip. Do you know what I mean?
I do too. I mean,
it's been bad enough that I'm willing to just flip a coin. I'm willing to open a door and walk into what's behind door number 2.
I think there is I think the flip a coin is, I think it's a weighted coin for it being better ownership. It is I don't know how much more, but I'd say I mean, the one that would worry me is a group from the outside
Correct.
the Twin Cities wanting a baseball team.
Which,
and
by the way,
willing to
is the most likely scenario.
Right.
I mean, I know people can Google richest people in Minnesota and hope,
Right.
the Wilfs or somebody try to buy it.
Right.
But the most likely thing is the majority owner will not be a lifelong Minnesotan.
Correct.
I mean, we saw that, by the way, the Wilfs are from New York.
Right.
A-Rod and Lori, who just bought the Wolves or are trying to buy the Wolves, are not Minnesotans either.
Leopold isn't, I don't think, from here either, right?
Oh, is that the Wild? Yeah, I don't even know who the Wild owner is. But yes. So obviously it'd be great if a lifelong Twins fan bought the Twins. That'd be amazing. But to your point, even if it was just a regular coin, and I agree that the odds are weighted in favor of optimism on there, I'd still flip a regular coin. Right. If it was just 50-50, 50% chance it's going to be better, 50% chance it's going to be the same or worse, I'm ready to flip a coin.
Okay.
I mean, 40 years of this.
Right.
Enough. It's enough.
Yeah.
Like the idea that anybody at this point, regardless, it could be the 50th generation of the Pohlads. We've seen all we need to see, I think, at this point.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that with all these ownership groups that are from outside Minnesota, having a part of franchises that are still within Minnesota,
right.
There's good reason for that. It's because there's not a better market out there right
Correct.
now. Right. You can say, oh, what if they really want to have a team in Nashville?
Right.
What if they really want to have a team in Portland or something like
or
that?
Or North Carolina, which they tried to sell to
North
20
Carolina,
years ago.
right, which they tried 20 years ago. None of those markets are as big as the Twin Cities market. Like they are. Now, maybe they're okay with losing a ton of money, or maybe they are okay losing a ton of money because they've got a different kind of stadium deal that is a different business model than they've got here with the downtown located Target Field. But I mean, the truth is that does provide an incentive to say, or we could just keep it in Minneapolis and St. Paul, run it competently, and continue to make money hand over fist.
Right.
That seems like a pretty good plan.
Yes. Right? And the other thing is, if you're a prospective owner, first of all, if you're listening to this and you're a prospective owner of the Twins, let us know.
Sure.
Got to be a billionaire listening to this, right? We got thousands of listeners.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of billionaires, right? If you're one of, you know what? Even if you have like 500 million,
sure,
drop me an email. We can,
we will help. We will. Yeah.
I don't know.
We're interested.
Sure. I don't mean to buy the Twins. I just want to know a rich person.
Right, okay.
It'd be great.
Okay.
Really, the only rich people I know don't like me that much because I write columns about how everyone should be glad they're selling the team.
Yeah. I'm worried about our friendship when I become a billionaire. I've said it many a time.
It is funny when people are like, "Are you worried you're going to lose access to the?" I'm like, "Are you high? What are you talking about?" Anyway, but here's the beauty of it: if you're a prospective owner, the bar is on the floor to clear as a new owner. People are going to want to not only give you a clean slate, which I think, by the way, in and of itself, given the vitriol surrounding the Pohlads' last 30 years of ownership, and certainly this year, and just the name association that if you say Pohlads to someone, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic to say the immediate reaction is, cheap or just, bad owners or whatever. Even if the new person...
Which, by the way, you think about the other teams, that is not the case.
I mean, it's the case for some, but yeah, the hope is.
I mean, the
local
ones,
right?
Yeah,
I agree.
Somebody says, "Oh, those Wolves,"
right?
Oh, those Leopold, jeez,
right. But the new person coming in, even if long term they don't plan to be that different than the Pohlads, all they got to do is buy the team. Say, you know what? We say the same thing we just said. We think this can be a great market. I'm committed to keeping it here. Yes, I'm from New York. Yes, I'm from out west. Whatever it is. I just think that this can be a good team. We got a good core. I'm going to raise payroll to league average. League average. Oh, my God, my pearls. League average. And maybe we'll make a couple of playoff runs here, not just one every 20 years. And maybe and if you do that, regardless of what the payroll looks like in 10 years, people are going to love that. People are going to eat that up.
Sure.
Because I can tell you that for a fact because Joe Pohlad had like 2 months of saying that stuff.
Yes,
before it all fell apart and he completely went back to business as usual and people were eating it up. They're desperate. They're hungry. It's a starving fan base.
Right.
And I don't just mean on the field.
Sure.
There's some of that, obviously. But I just mean there's a desire from any fan base, but certainly one that's been through the last 30 plus years of the Pohlads, to feel like the person actually in charge of the thing cares as much as you do.
Right.
Or any fraction of what you do. And I just feel like that has been so lacking, rightfully or wrong. They'll tell you it's wrong, but whatever.
Sure.
I would argue the proof is in your actions more than your words or all that stuff. But I think that is really the underrated part of this team as an item for sale. You could swoop in. Nobody's asking you to have a top 10 payroll.
It's a real easy marketing opportunity.
They're asking you to rank 16th out of 30. Just commit to that level every year. And this team will win a lot. This team can greatly expand its fan base, especially when combined with the new television situation and maybe, new broom sweeps clean on a lot of fronts if they have ideas for how they can expand that. I mean, we forget that, like, the state of this team from a business standpoint, and you have the POLAD side claiming they're losing money. Well, it's your business.
Right.
Like, okay, you get what you deserve on that front. And so a new person has such an opportunity with a small level of tweaking. You add a little bit of capital into the thing. You give a few good press conferences when you go, all right, let's do it differently, blah, blah, blah. I'm not asking for Mark Cuban. I'm asking for someone who wants to come in and spend a slightly larger fraction of their ridiculous level of wealth to have a little more fun and get a fan base into it and be the owner of a luxury item that succeeds instead of one that, we're losing too much money. And so I think it really is an opportunity, and I'm speaking on behalf of billionaires out there, for someone to just go, you know what? Why can't this be the number 14 baseball market? Why can't this be closer to San Diego or St. Louis or some of those other markets?
Yes.
They can get 2.5 million, 3 million fans. Why can't that be that?
This isn't a new franchise anymore. This is a franchise that's been here for 60 years, and it's got a fair amount of tradition behind it. It's got, let's play this thing up. Let's have it be a significant asset of the community that people want to talk about and get excited about. I mean, listen, all you have to do is take a look at what happened to the Wolves over the last 2 years. When an ownership group comes in there and is like, let's try to make this something really, really great.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Let's invest in it a little bit and see if we can get. I mean, that is a franchise that has been here since the 90s, not since the 60s. It was a franchise that was, kind of similar in that for decades it was
the losingest franchise of any franchise ever for 30 years.
That's exactly right.
Or more than that.
Right. And all it took was,
great player.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some bold trades.
Absolutely.
And an ownership group that came in and they did exactly, by the way, what I'm saying. And they still don't own fully. So I'll give Glenn Taylor, I suppose, some credit here. And by the way, this is an example of maybe 10 years from now, people will look back and go, A-Rod and Laurie kind of oversold what they were actually going to do.
Sure, right.
But you see, by just coming in and being a fresh voice and putting some money into it and saying, we're not trying to save every penny we can save.
And go and try and buy season tickets now. Right. You can't do it. Right. I mean, it's...
Yeah. I mean, A-Rod
can you imagine if the Twins had that problem? Like, boy, we have got a waiting list for season tickets for Targetville. Can you imagine?
They got...
right.
Their season ticket base is
going
to be
know.
Sad.
Right.
So that's where we're at on the payroll front. We you may have thought the last segment was very emotional. We got a lot more emotional on it on the Patreon if you really want to see us kind of get deeper into the weeds on it and go off on some more rants and everything. But I guess my big picture view, I think you probably agree, but is that this is reason for celebration or excitement for Twins fans, but the uncertainty certainly looms as
we understand the uncertainty.
Absolutely. And the big, I get that. I guess I don't truly understand, having lived through the last 30-something years of pull-out ownership. I don't really get the reaction of, I wish the pull-outs would just stick around because the next one could be worse. Unless you really think the team is going to be moved. Because the reality is, if the team is relocated and they're no longer in Minnesota, the owner is by definition significantly worse than the Polads. And so I get that. There is the doomsday option that comes with, or the doomsday outcome that comes with selling the team that was not going to come with the Polads. Although I will say that 30 years ago, the Polads tried twice the doomsday outcome. Before we talk about the television and payroll situation, which took a backseat to this stuff, but really was a prominent topic,
huge topic all by itself.
Let's talk about our last couple of sponsors. One is BetterHelp, who's sponsoring the show. And the way BetterHelp works is if you have something in your life that's been bugging you, and you've been thinking about, it'd be good if I could talk to someone about this, get some help on this. But I know how it works. Some days you wake up and it seems like an insurmountable thing to get help. And the last thing you need, if you do wake up one day and go, today's the day, is to have barriers for entry, to have speed bumps on that road. Right. Whether it's having to call someone, whether it's having to wait a month for an appointment, whether it's not even knowing who to call.
Not knowing who to call, trying to get recommendations, who do you talk to for your friends,
BetterHelp
et cetera.
can set you up with a real licensed therapist that can help with whatever your specific need is. And the beauty of it is they can set it up so that if you want to do a video call, you do a video call. If you don't want to be on camera, you do a phone call. If you're like me and you hate being on the phone, you do a live chat where you're just typing. They will kind of tailor it to whatever you're comfortable with. That's right. And they can typically set it up within a few days, which is a lot shorter.
And I mean, the barrier for entry is go out there and just fill out a questionnaire. Right. Go out, fill out a questionnaire, and you're going to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can also, by the way, switch therapists at any time. Like it turns out, this person isn't doing what I wanted for.
It doesn't have to be a lifelong commitment to BetterHelp. It's a step in the right direction.
That's right.
And take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Gleeman today, and you will get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP. BetterHelp.com/Gleeman, our final sponsor of the day.
Game Time. It's an app, not a website. It's an app that you download.
Speaking of wolf season,
yes.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited about the Lynx games I'm going to on Wednesday and Friday.
One of our friends just offered me last night to sell me his one Lynx ticket for $250. And you know what I thought? I'm going to go on Game Time and see if I can get something a little better than that.
That's exactly right.
Game Time, like you said, it's an app, not a website. The Game Time app, you download it on your phone. They specialize in hard-to-find tickets, not just sporting events, but shows and concerts and stuff like that. But last-minute tickets is really their specialty. Right. So, for instance, if it's the day before the Lynx game and you go, I really want to go, and then you look and it's like, oh, my God. You can go on Game Time, and they have a system on there that will kind of sort by the best value.
That's right.
In terms of where the actual ticket is relative to the price.
Yep, you can see where that seat is in comparison. Like you're not intimately familiar with what a good section is at Target Center. Well, you can go on there, see exactly where that seat is. You can see what the view looks like from that seat.
Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Gleeman for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but create an account, redeem the code GLEEMAN for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Okay. It's enough poll ad talk for a while. I wrote this today. Like, I have a column up this morning about a lot of stuff we've been talking about. And in part of it, I just said, I'm just sick of talking about them. Like, you know what I mean? I'm sick. Right. Like, even if it's I know this sounds stupid, a different name to say, a different... avatar of ownership.
Sure.
I'll take it. Even if it's not any different. Like, I'm just sick of the same. We talked about this on the Patreon. I remember back in 2017 when the 2-decade Terry Ryan regime was let go finally. And the Falvey regime started, and he brought in Thad Levine, and they started to remake the front office and analytics department and all that.
We had to relearn everything that we knew about what we thought knew about the Twins.
Right, because after 20 years of the same front office, you know how they work. Right. I mean, you can complete each other's sentences, basically. Like, we knew how Terry Ryan approached trades. We knew his willingness to risk or not risk. We knew what type of starting pitchers he liked. We knew what type of coaches he liked to hire. All that stuff. We could almost fill in the blanks at the start of an offseason before it even started. And we had to, first of all, forget all that and then relearn with another front office. And I personally, after a decade plus of covering or writing about or talking about Terry Ryan's regime, almost 15 years of it at that point, I found that exciting.
Sure.
And it wasn't because I thought necessarily the new front office would be 10 times better.
It's just going to be different.
Going to be different.
Just something a little bit different. How many different times would be the offseason that Carlos Correa signed with the Twins? How many times did we talk about Carlos Correa and immediately say, we don't have to worry about Carlos Correa being a free agent that's going to sign with the Twins?
We had learned. That was learned behavior.
That's right.
Even Donaldson.
We had to unlearn a lot of stuff.
No, that doesn't mean all those moves were good.
Right.
But it means what seemed impossible with a previous setup, you can kind of relearn what is possible. And they have flaws too, believe me.
Sure.
And they have blind spots, and they have weird stuff that they like that they shouldn't like, and all of the above. But I think you can apply that same thing to the ownership perspective, which even if the new owners are the same, essentially, it'll be different in that there will be certain things they do differently. Maybe they're better in front of a microphone.
Sure.
Maybe they
maybe there'll be stuff on the game experience that they will invest in.
Maybe they'll push
marketing
for
with
a different TV
different
or
kind of
radio or
ticket prices.
Who knows?
Or whatever,
I mean,
yes,
we're trying to think of there's an unlimited possibilities here,
Right.
and so I would find just that alone exciting to just sort of learn along as it's happening. So, but let's talk about one of the key things here for a new ownership group is the television deal.
Right.
The Twins are leaving Bally Sports, which was under the Diamond Sports umbrella. Basically, they've been on Fox Sports, which turned into Bally Sports, for well over a decade.
Well, I mean,
They were on MSC when I was a kid.
right. I mean, that was bought by Fox
I'm
Sports.
saying has it been 20 years?
Well, it's been since the early 90s,
Okay.
I think. I mean, it's been 30 years since they've had Midwest Sports Channel, I think.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm saying that was like I know it got bought out, but that I viewed as a little bit different. They used to run the Royce Sid show.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a little bit more local feeling, I guess, sort of. But Fox Sports and Bally Sports were just one of 15 identical
Sure.
properties. Right. There was a Fox Sports Midwest and a Fox Sports Northeast and a Fox Sports Arizona and a Fox, same thing.
Right.
They are now done with them, and they essentially did the same deal they could have done last year at this exact time.
Right.
Which is they were free agents on a TV front last year. And I think it's pretty clear that they were planning to take this new setup last year at this time because they started talking about, and poor Corey Provis came on our show and just repeated what he had been told from the upper management, which is blackouts are over. And while he didn't say we're going under the MLB umbrella, it was easy to read between those lines because the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, and the Padres had already done that.
Right.
So we thought, okay, there's precedent for that. The Twins are free agents. They're going to be done with Bally. They're going to probably lose even more money in the short term, but they're going to greatly expand their reach. They're going to get rid of blackouts, all the stuff they talked up, and even Dave St. Peter talked up at the time. Well, then Bally came back to them and said, we'll give you half, basically, what we used to give you.
Right.
And that's still $25 million more probably than they thought they'd make on their own or going under MLB's umbrella. And so they said, all that talk of blackouts and expanded reach and a new era and all that stuff, we'll take the $25 million. We'll go back to the same setup that we had.
But we don't know if it was $25 million or if it was whatever it was. But
I was told it was around half.
Okay.
And what was originally $54 million per year was their original.
Yes, that's right.
Now, if that's true, not true, that's just what I've been told. So now you get a chance to, and I don't think that worked out particularly well on any level. First of all, it pissed off the fans because you overpromised and underdelivered.
Sure.
Second of all, then you cut the payroll and tried to play it off as part of that, basically.
That's right.
Then, not only did you go back to a setup that limited your audience in the first place, but then at around mid-season, Comcast dropped the channel, so like 40% of then your already smaller audience was shed. There was a point in the season where 20% of the possible audience was able to watch the Twins, essentially. Right. And then when they finally got back on Comcast, like in August 1st, first week of August, then the team went to 12 and 27 down the stretch. So I can't imagine really it playing out in a worse, like a 1 year re-up.
They managed to mess it up about every.
Yes.
As Chrissy likes to say, they have to have so much it just makes you want to cry.
Does she say that about you a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get the feeling.
Oh, they're just effing up so much it makes you want to cry.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, that's it.
So now they had the opportunity to essentially right those wrongs, I guess, or make the decision that they were, for whatever reason, scared to make or unwilling to make last year. Now, the difference this time around is Bally Sports, Diamond Sports is even in worse shape. Right. They're shedding teams. They're in bankruptcy court. All this stuff. My guess is, or my sense is, they could have re-upped with Bally Sports for another year, but it would have been for even
less money. Yeah,
less money. And at this point,
I mean, Bally Sports is also not getting paid the same way they were being paid by Comcast in the past. It used to be that they were being paid for every subscriber, like it was part of the basic channel. Now they're only getting paid based on the fact that they're a premium tier. Correct. So they've got much fewer people subscribing to it than.
So if you're cynical, you say, well, why did they choose to leave this year when they didn't choose to leave last year? And it could be as simple as instead of getting $30 million, they were only going to get 15 or 10 or 12.
Right.
That's probably a large part of it. I think another thing
didn't hurt as much.
now,
Right.
I would argue that this time last year, the mask was off already with the Bally situation. And
Agreed.
go listen to, when they re-upped with Bally, go listen to our reaction at the time, which was, you're getting back into bed with somebody you know is no good.
Right.
And is going to screw you over and is in bankruptcy and is not going to pay you and is not going to, but you're getting back knowingly. So I have no sympathy for that. Well, now, if the mask wasn't off then, I mean, it's off now. Like,
Right, yes.
if you're not looking at the Bally situation and saying who would willingly crawl into bed with them at this point, not even the Twins would be willing to do that. So setting aside the reasoning, I do think that the television component, the change that we're going to see here, is unequivocally good news for Twins fans in the short term.
Sure.
And by that, I
At
mean,
least for the 2025 season.
Right.
Right.
because
By the way, we should also mention, like, there's nothing tying the Twins to MLB media
Correct.
going forward.
St. Peter was
after
asked about this the day of the announcement, or the night of the announcement, and he basically said, we would love for this to be a 20-year arrangement,
Right.
but we're going to evaluate it day by day.
Year by year.
Yeah.
Right. And Major League Baseball is part of that evaluation process. It's not just the Twins as part of that evaluation process. The whole point, one of the things we heard last year at this time was that part of what was handcuffing the Twins was Major League Baseball was encouraging them not to get into a long-term deal with anybody because we've got, 13 teams that might be free agents at the end of this year, right about now.
Clearly, Major League Baseball would like to be able to offer sort of a nationwide but local streaming package to Apple or Amazon or their own umbrella, whatever it is, and to sell it as kind of a souped up version of MLB TV, which is their product now.
Right.
And by this time next year, if things kind of play out as they're set now, they would have like 13 to 15 teams, free agents or able to go under their umbrella, basically. Now they have 6. Padres, Diamondbacks, Rockies last year, or this year, the year that just ended, and now the Twins, Brewers, and Guardians have joined them. So they have 6. It's possible there's more coming this offseason yet.
Yeah, and in fact, in a bankruptcy filing or bankruptcy hearing, I should say, a couple weeks ago, Diamond Sports or the Bally Sports North Regional Networks said they want to drop like 12
All but
12
the
of the
Atlanta Braves,
Yeah, like 12 of the 13 teams they have under contract. They have existing contracts with a lot of these teams. As part of the bankruptcy court, they're trying to get out from underneath those contracts. They're trying to break those contracts. So I'm skeptical of MLB's ability to put that together in a meaningful way, not because I think the sheer number of teams won't equal roughly half of the league, but because I think the viability of that type of product, a kind of nationwide but local streaming product, it doesn't work if you don't have the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Mets and the Dodgers and the Cubs and fill in the blanks. Yep. And those are all the teams at the top of the spending list, and not coincidentally, those are the teams that have the most lucrative local television deals. Correct. Several of those teams, like the Yankees, just own their own network and are making hundreds of millions of dollars that way. Right. They have no motivation to abandon those setups and go under an umbrella so they can split evenly with 29 other teams. Right. However, if the entire cable industry dies, which is clearly headed that way, there may not be a choice. So it's possible sometime in the future, but I just don't see that being. But in the meantime, who cares about MLB as a whole? Right. I'm looking at the Minnesota Twins and people who are listeners and fans of the team who want to watch the damn team. And it's been made so difficult to do that over the years. Well, here's the setup that you're going to have for this season. There's going to be a roughly $100 per season direct-to-consumer streaming option that you can just watch as you watch Apple TV or Amazon or anything on your television. Right. You sign up for the MLB TV app. You click the kind of Twins bonus content or whatever you would call it. Not John bonus. bonus. It's like $100. It'll be like $20 a month or $100 a season, something like that. Roughly in that range. They haven't confirmed that. Well, that's in itself, with no local blackouts, that's a massive change.
I mean, that's what
Right.
people have been begging for
course.
5 years,
Right.
basically.
I mean, what's been absolutely unavailable to people who are trying to stream, who wanted to cut the cord with cable, was a direct-to-consumer streaming option.
Right.
If there was a streaming option, you had to go through a different provider that was just like your cable provider, like Fubo or something.
Right. Now, they're also free, if they would like to attach themselves to places like that, YouTube TV,
yes,
Fubo,
right.
whatever. They can still do that. Now they've unburdened themselves from all obligations from a streaming front.
Right.
It's just they can offer it to whoever they want now at this point.
Because prior to this, before, as part of their deal with Bally Sports North, or with the Diamond Sports Group that owned Bally Sports North, they were not allowed to offer a direct-to-consumer streaming option. That was built by signing the cable contract that they had. They could not go and do direct-to-consumer streaming. So.
Now, for the people who hear that and go, well, I just want to watch them on TV, like I've been doing for 50 years.
Sure.
That
Got
is
cable,
also
yeah.
going to be an option as well. So the way it'll work, most likely, is that it will follow the Diamondbacks Padres model from this past season, which is the Twins will basically create a Twins TV channel. It might even be called Twins TV or something. And they'll negotiate placement on Comcast, DirecTV, Dish Network.
Right.
They seem pretty confident.
Spectrum, whatever.
To the point that my guess is it's already sort of worked out on a bigger logistical front, that they already have the terms in place for that, but we'll see. And the way it'll work, let's say for DirecTV, I have DirecTV. I've had it for 20-something years. Channel 668 on DirecTV was Bally Sports North. 24/7 content, right? Ron shares outdoors and replays the stuff, and who knows. The way the Twins channel will differ is it'll be a different channel. It'll be like 710 or whatever it is. And it will most likely only like go live, like only be kind of an active channel, like during the game.
Right.
Now, it might include a half-hour pregame and a half-hour postgame, but even that is kind of up in the air at this point. It really could be as simple as for a 7:10 game, if you turn into that channel at 6:59, it's a screensaver.
Right.
And at 7 o'clock, here we go, Twins broadcast. Now, the actual broadcast itself...
And by the way, we should just say, they haven't announced exactly how any of this is going to work. We are deducing this from what we saw last year with the
Correct.
Padres and...
St. Peter did
Yeah,
indicate
Diamondbacks.
that would be the most likely. Now, the
Okay.
details within that, in terms of post-game show and all that,
Sure.
and they have the ability, if they would like to, have ancillary content on there.
Sure.
They want to put Gleeman and the Geek on there for 3 hours a day. Go for it.
I'm sure that's what they mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I got the good story on the radio front. Maybe I'll tell it one day along those lines, but I won't.
Okay.
They can put as much kind of extra padding of content on there as they want, but my guess is they're going to keep it pretty streamlined on that front, or MLB will. But the actual presentation of the game itself should be pretty similar. Like, it'll have different graphics and all that stuff, but the score bug will be different. But presentationally, I can tell you I watched a lot of Padres games in the second half of this year because they were a very exciting, interesting team.
Sure.
You could tell no difference from, whatever Fox Sports San Diego or whatever it was versus what this current setup under MLB was. So they will have kind of a Twins channel on however you get your normal cable or satellite, most likely.
Right.
And it will be active during games, maybe active for some pre or post game. Who knows? I don't want to guarantee that. That's all anybody wanted, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm sure people watch Bally Sports during the day, and there's other content on there. They got Trevor Plouffe playing softball in a warehouse during the day. Sure. They got a lot of talking heads yelling at each other about gambling during the day, whatever it is. A 24/7 channel is a nice thing.
Sure.
But if ditching that means more people can just watch the damn baseball team,
Right.
I'll take that every time.
Of course.
So that's why I'm optimistic for fans in the short term, because the reality is, for all the people who have said, I've checked out the Twins because I haven't been able to watch them, or it's been so difficult and I've had to spend. I'm not saying it's going to be cheap. I'm not saying it's going to be cheaper. I'm not saying, but it's available to you. It will be available to you. And as stupid as it sounds, that like making a product available to everyone who wants it is a major step in the right direction.
Right.
That's undeniably true.
Yes.
And so that is now that same reasoning doesn't necessarily make me optimistic from the Twins standpoint in terms of revenue.
Well, no, it's absolutely
Because
it's a disaster for the Twins in terms of revenue, but it's going to be a disaster for all of the teams in terms of revenue.
This
But
boat is sinking. It
That's
matters little if you jump
this
off
bubble
today
has burst
or next year.
Right, this bubble has burst, and so
And jump off now because you can grab one of the few life rafts available.
that's right. Even the teams that own their own networks, it's a disaster.
Right. They're just more incentivized to stick with it as long
they're
as
a little more insulated
to go down with the ship.
That's
because
exactly
they got more money
That's
flowing
right.
in.
That's right.
And the reason for that, I know people go, well, if they're expanding their reach, and in their press release they said, we only had a potential reach of 1.08 million this year because they were off so many outlets they couldn't.
Right.
And this year we think it'll be, or next year we think it'll be 4.4 million. Well, yeah, that's fine, but any channel can say that. Right. The reality is the reason the cable and satellite system of the past 20 years, let's say, or 30 years, was so successful as a moneymaker, and was that taking, let's say, Bally Sports for example, every Comcast subscriber or every DirecTV subscriber, fill in the blank with everyone, they all had that channel on their bill because it was just part of the overall channel collection that they were paying for. And so if you were paying $100-something a month for all the channels, $7, let's say, per month of that money.
Basically being divvied up between all of the channels that you've got.
Whether you watched it or not. And the reality is, even on the most popular channels, which I'm sure Bally Sports was a lot more popular than, the Third History Channel, or
maybe,
I don't know.
It was on Tuesday nights in the summer.
Well,
right.
But regardless of whether people watched it or not, 100% of people who paid a cable bill were paying X dollars per month out of that bill, essentially directly to Bally.
And it wasn't like a lot of these channels will be charging less than $1 for them to be on the cable.
Some of them are
package.
free.
Yeah, right.
They just want to be on.
That's right. Bally Sports North indications are they were getting $8 to $10 per subscriber.
Live sports is king.
Right.
Still is. It's going to be more so now than ever.
That's right. But that happened whether or not you were ever a Twins fan, a Wild fan, a Wolves fan. You were still paying that $8 to $10 a month.
So think about how many millions of people are on DirecTV, Dish, Comcast, whatever, paying $100-something a month. And of that, a $8 slice was being taken out and given to Bally, and then by way of Bally, the Twins. Think of how many millions of people. Even if it's 1 million people, that's $8 million a month. Times 12 months a year, you're at $100 million already. And it's probably more than that.
And that's how you get with a $54 million
That's
TV
how Bally
contract.
could take that money, give, let's say, a quarter of it or a third of it or whatever to the Twins in the form of $54 million a year. So then you're saying, well, why can't they just make that now on their own? Well, here's the math that falls apart. Now, as a direct-to-consumer streaming product, it's not everyone who has cable is paying us $8 a month. It's who's willing to give us $100 a year specifically to us, specifically to watch our channel. And I will tell you that the Padres are currently viewed as the leader of the pack here. They are the positive example given by teams. And my understanding is that their subscriber base this season, which, by the way, they made the playoffs and won a playoff series.
This is not a bad team.
And they sold out. They got a fan base that's rabid at this point. It was about 40,000. We'll do the math on that. If all of them paid $100 a season, 40,000, that's $4 million. Now, there's additional money from that. They can take control of some or all ad money, which is going to be other millions, but it's not going to be tens of millions.
Yeah, just so we're clear.
They're selling ads to Menards a lot of the time. It's money, but it's not, And there's also, they're going to be able to now get some money for placing this channel on DirecTV, Comcast, but it's not going to be $8 a month because you have no other programming.
Correct.
All you have is the Twins game. So maybe it might be $1 per customer or something like that.
Maybe.
Whatever the case is, even on the optimistic side, you're at a fraction of the $54 million you made 2 years ago, and probably a fraction of the $25 to $35 million that you made this past season. That's the reality. And the math doesn't necessarily start to work out any better even if you got to 60,000, which is very optimistic. 60,000 people paying money directly basically to the Twins to watch them on TV is very optimistic. And maybe you build up the audience and you get more ad revenue and you can charge more to place your channel on various places. But the real upside of this, I think, eventually is some type of local streaming sale to Amazon, Apple, fill in the blank,
right, yes.
where they start to play kind of the Comcast role.
Where somebody's trying to get subscribers to their system,
Correct.
and as a result, they're willing to overpay for the sports TV rights for something
Which
like
I think
that.
would be smart on their behalf.
Yeah.
Because the goal of streaming services, there's so many of them now.
Right.
I pay for all of them because I'm an idiot.
I do too.
There's a million of them. I can't even keep track. And they're struggling to kind of build up an audience because there's so many of them, and content now is so spread thin.
Yes.
And good shows come and go, and nobody even knows about them because they're it's on whatever streaming. Well, how can they get people to sign up? They either need a hit show, like Ted Lasso did huge for Apple,
Sure, right.
because people had to go to Apple to watch it. I'm just using that as an example.
That's a good example, though.
But sports is king, and I can tell you that because I've worked for NBC, and
Sure.
beyond that, The Athletic and stuff. And we've started a thing where we charge people directly to listen to it.
Right.
It's one of the few remaining things that people will pay directly for to watch. And it's one of the few remaining things, because it's live,
Right.
that people cannot just skip over the commercials.
That's right.
So you can get a higher ad revenue or ad base per commercial. And so if you're Amazon or Apple or whatever it is, Hulu, whatever it is, some new place, well, how do you get 40,000 Minnesotans
Right.
to sign up for Apple or Hulu or whatever? Maybe it's because you got some good drama on.
That is what the Twins are hoping, and what Major League Baseball in general, and all of these teams in Major League Baseball are hoping, is that a new business model comes along
that's close enough to the old one,
That's
or
right.
at least kind of replicates the key elements of the old one.
Now, I don't think that's going to happen, this summer or this offseason.
I did talk to someone in that industry a few days ago, and that conversation turned me from pessimistic to sort of neutral on this overall picture of the distribution or broadcast or streaming, because their point was 5 years from now. Their point actually to me was, think 5 years ago what the streaming universe looked like. And it existed,
Yeah,
but I mean,
sure.
it's grown.
It was Netflix.
Right. Now they said, think 5 or 10 years ahead, where the cable and satellite model has completely crashed. Everything is streaming.
Right.
There's a kind of a renewed fight for content in the same way there was previously, and for a lot of the things that we just laid out. And so it did make me think, okay, if you're a new owner buying into the Twins, particularly if you're a new owner who either A, has some experience in that realm, which is possible, or B, you're coming in with a fresh eyes and you're not beholden to places like WCCO because you've been there forever, or the old cable model or whatever, and you're just coming in saying, all right, who wants to party here?
Right.
Who wants to give me money? Let's get this out. Let's stream the hell of it, whatever. I do think 5 or 10 years down the road, there will be an opportunity to make as much or more than you used to, but you're counting on the industry as a whole growing in the way that people are hoping, and you have to make the right decisions within that too.
But now they are free to do that. They are not locked into some contract, which, I mean, not only locked into sort of the old business model, but locked into the old business model where in that contract it said you can't stream. You can't do direct-to-consumer streaming. So
it was ridiculous.
Right. I mean, it was
anybody who's tried to watch the Twins and been able to, and you get infuriated, and I don't blame you. And we've heard from tons of people who the only contact they have with the Twins is listening to the podcast.
That's right.
And while we appreciate that, that's great.
Appreciate it. Yep.
It's sad. Just here's one thing I'll say, and then we can talk about a few other things. All of that stuff that we just talked about in terms of a future outlook relies upon having a product that people want. And the big difference between making this jump last year when they could have and chose not to, and making it this year when the boat had sunk even further and it was more obvious.
Right. It's the enthusiasm of the fan base around that. Right.
If you would have made this jump exactly 12 months ago, well, maybe not, because they were just eliminated from the playoffs. So maybe 12 months, give or take a week or two.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But coming off that playoff run, as it were, and I will count it as a run because we haven't seen anything like it in 20 years.
Right.
The fan base was ready. If you said jump, they said how high.
Right. Yep.
And if you would have said at that point, not only are you guys loving life as a Twins fan right now, we had a $160 million payroll. We got Carlos Correa. We just won a playoff series. Things are looking up. everybody's got euphoria from being at winning playoff games for the first time in a lot of people's lives. And if you were to say, not only that, but this TV mess we've been dealing with, done, gone. Here's what we got. All the things we just laid out. Direct to consumer, $100 a year. Sign up. Here it is. They would have had a rush of subscribers to that.
Yeah. I mean, certainly more than they're going to get now, at least. Yeah, right.
And now you pissed everyone off for an entire year, on and off the field.
Right.
You finished in fourth
Both
place.
with the TV deal and with the by cutting payroll and by one of the most disappointing endings of a season in Twins
now
history.
you're going, we need you to sign up and pay $100 a month.
Right.
And there's going to be people who go, please,
right.
$100 for that?
Right.
You pay me $100. Not a month, a season. And so they really have put themselves in a tricky spot just by making the same decision a year later.
Right.
And it's better late than never. I give them some level of credit for not pushing this off, kicking this can down the road again, because I think that would have only led to a worse outcome.
Of course.
But it's undeniable that they have kind of waited to launch this product, which has a huge impact on their future, until the worst possible time, or at least a significantly worse time than 12 years prior would have been. I mean, honestly, I would guess that the difference between launching it coming off last season and coming off this season is 50% of the signups, I would bet.
Maybe.
Wouldn't you say? Maybe. And I don't know. I mean, I'm saying if it would have been 25,000 then, you might get 13,000 now. Yeah. I just don't sense a push or a motivation from this fan base to invest anything. Now, maybe the ownership situation now potentially changing has at least given people reason enough to hope that things could be different.
Right.
But the reality is this ownership situation, if it does ever happen, it's not going to happen quickly.
No, I don't think. One of the questions we talked about on the Patreon was like, what's the timeline look like for this? And I don't think the timeline is particularly quick. I don't think it's going to affect the 2025 off season.
No.
Or the 2024, 2025
if this
off
is in place by opening day, in terms of an agreement, I'll be very surprised.
I'll be shocked.
I mean, I think it's a year, not months.
Right.
And as we've seen from the Wolves, now that's a different situation. They basically tried to rent to own.
Right, yeah, that's right.
But that's dragging out years and years and years, even beyond what they thought it was going to be. So the other thing I'll say, and just to end on this is, I guess two things. One is St. Peter, when talking about the television deal in the middle of last week, specifically mentioned Corey Provis, who's their play-by-play guy, and Justin Morneau, who's the primary analyst. But when asked about everything else about the broadcast,
right,
in terms of pregame,
producers,
postgame,
cameramen, right,
how it's going to work, is it MLB running the show? Is it the Twins running the show? Are they just going to hire all the same Bally people and just move them over to MLB, which I would love to see? Because I don't think people realize, and I certainly didn't realize this until I started going to the ballpark every day and getting to know some of these people, to see the dozens and dozens of people who behind the scenes do a job that puts the Twins on the air, basically, let alone the pre and post game hosts, the announcers, the sideline reporters, the audio, all the stuff that's obvious to people. And these are people who have had their jobs in flux for now 2+ years. Right. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know when this is going to end. And now they're in the ultimate, middle ground where it's like, we don't know who our employer would be or if they're even going to keep these jobs.
And Bally Sports North still has Wild and Wolves for at least one more year. And they don't have the Twins. So now they've got basically a winter job, but not a summer job.
Right.
It's
a really tough spot for a lot of good people, a lot of lifelong Minnesotans, a lot of people who are not rich. These are just jobs. These are just, you're a cameraman or you're a segment producer.
A lot of them aren't even really employees. A lot of them are freelance.
Yes. And so it puts them in a really difficult spot after a couple years of being in a difficult spot. And all St. Peter would say on that front is, we recognize that this is a tricky situation. We're going to do all we can to keep as many people as possible. But I think, unfortunately, the reality is it's not going to be the Twins' decision to make. Right. You go under the MLB umbrella, and I guess my fear on that front for these individual people is that if MLB's running 6 teams or 8 teams or 13 teams, they can kind of streamline a lot of the components so that someone's doing more than one job.
Consolidate a lot of that stuff,
So there's maybe redundancies, as they like to say in England. And that would be a shame, I think, because then you lose a lot of kind of the local aspect of it. The last thing I want to say on this front, in terms of like a domino effect, is St. Peter was asked last Wednesday or whatever, what effect this TV change will have on the payroll. And he said, I don't expect it to have any change on the 2025 payroll. And that is despite him saying we expect to make significantly less revenue next year, which for all the reasons we just discussed. And I know people are skeptical of that. They go, well, if they're admitting they're going to make a lot less revenue, isn't it just very Twins-like or very Pohlad-like or very Dave St. Peter-like to then use that as a reason to further lower the payroll? And I agree. But a week earlier, I sat in a room with Joe Pohlad, and I asked him a billion questions, seemingly, about the payroll, and he sidestepped every one. And then I was told from Twin sources afterward that payroll is not going down further after being 130 this year. And that's not reason to celebrate, as we pointed out. That's just a positive spin to say, hey, payroll's not dropping any further. That's just a positive way to spin, hey, the big slash of payroll, that's the new normal. However, what I will say is...
and it's not going up, by the way.
And so I'm not positioning that as a positive thing. However, I do think it's relevant compared to then a week later when Dave St. Peter's talking about it and says we don't expect it to impact payroll, because here's the reality. They knew this television situation was in place. Maybe there were, a couple of T's to cross and an I to dot or whatever, but it was in place by the time the last game of the season when people were talking about the payroll. You would have to be, and I don't put anything past the Twins from bungling a situation.
Sure.
Believe me. But you would have to just be out of your mind to have a television situation coming a week later and go, we're not going to change the payroll, and then go, oh, actually, television's going to be worse. We're going to lower the payroll. I mean, that would just be unthinkable bad PR, basically. And the other thing he said specifically was when Joe Pohlad talked in the thing we've read the quotes for, he knew the television situation. I'll take that a step further. He knew they were going to put the team up for sale.
I think probably,
too. I mean, you cannot convince me that was a decision made in a 10-day span
I agree.
between the last Sunday of the season.
I think there's indications that it's been in the works for a long time. I'll tell you a couple things that you do prior to putting something up for sale. One of the things you often do is cut your expenses by a lot, because that increases the EBITDA for how much, from an investment perspective you can get for it. And that might be part of what played into the $30 million payroll cut. And I'll give you another one. Another thing you often do, you rebrand. A lot of times you rebrand a business before you do that. And they did that over 2 years ago.
Right. That was like his first thing, essentially.
That was before he even was made.
Actually, they positioned that as like this was the big test for him. If he handles this rebrand well, we'll put him in the big chair.
Yes, right.
Although the argument I make, and I'm sure that's true, about if you're going to sell something, you get it bare bones so that the books look better, the profits and losses. But the thing about that is, you cannot tell me, with 20/20 hindsight, obviously, that the $30 million they saved in costs was not canceled out threefold by the team being bad, attendance tanking, fan morale being bad. So if you're a potential owner coming in, you got to be looking at those books.
They might not have lost $30 million worth of revenue. They might have lost $15 million worth of revenue. There's still an extra $15 million of
I just mean, big picture, this thing declined in value. Short-term value by more than the $30 million they cut.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when you're selling it for $2 billion, who cares? I mean, ultimately. So that's and then again, the reason I bring up the payroll is, and we talked a lot about this on the Patreon side. We kind of went through the roster.
Yes.
Remove the free agents.
It was a really good conversation. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
It was a good
hour and a half on this, and we'll just leave you with this summary of it.
The big thought was, if it stays at 130. Which at this point is optimistic, because that means it's not going down. That's taking them at their word, which I know people are hesitant to do. They're already over 130 in terms of projected money with the current roster. And that's with eliminating Kepler and Santana and other free agents. All that's doing is looking at the guaranteed contracts, which they have 6 of, totaling like $93 million. And then the 12 or 13 arbitration eligible players who are all getting raises to the $3 to $6 million range.
The no-brainer arbitration ones.
Guys who you're not going to cut. I mean, Joe Ryan goes from making a minimum salary to making $3.5 million. Well, he's obviously worth $3.5 million, but that's still $3 million more than you spent on him last year. So you add all that up, and you're already at like 130 to 135. Right. And if you have a $130 million payroll, just logically, something's got to give. Right. And we kind of debated what we each individually think will be that something to give. This will
be the primary topic of the offseason, but it's well worth going. And maybe we'll go into it next time we have a free podcast, which I think will be about 2 weeks. Yeah. Maybe a week from Friday, I think, is our next.
But in the meantime,
free one.
Sign up for the Patreon. Yeah. Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We do mailbags. We're going to have guests. We'll start to kind of break down trade possibilities, roster moves.
Yeah. Who from the Twins might move to free up some payroll space or to improve the team or to just shake up the team. We had a long debate about whether or not we think they're going to really shake up the team or just kind of make some changes around the edges.
It'll cost you basically during the offseason $1 a week.
That's right.
At most. So we would love to have you join. In the meantime,
thanks to our sponsors for keeping this one free. That includes BetterHelp, Game Time, Harry's, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. Now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. Stop by your favorite liquor store or the Black Stack Tap Room to grab your favorite brew or try something new. And we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks.
Gleeman